Hello, viewer, and welcome to Worldview. This is a program designed to bring you up to speed with trending developments the world over. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. And on our top stories today, U.S. President Joe Biden says China has real problems, speaking at fundraiser in San Francisco on eve of eagerly awaited meeting in U.S. city. Hamas blames both Israel and United States for Israeli army's raid on Gaza's largest hospital. Former Social Democratic and Labour Party Deputy Mayor of Derry City and Strabane, James McKeevy, loses appeal against his conviction for sexually abusing a girl in the 1980s. Details of these stories and more in a moment. First on Worldview today, China and the United States have agreed to resume stalled cooperation on the climate crisis, curbing methane and plastic pollution before this month's crucial COP28 UN Climate Summit held in Dubai. Wednesday's announcement follows a meeting between U.S. climate envoy John Kerry and Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping earlier this month at the Sunnylands Resort in California. Following a pause driven by political differences, the world's biggest polluters pledged to establish bilateral working group on climate action and ensuring the success of COP28. The countries declared their intention to work together to rise up to one of the greatest challenges of their time for present and future generations of humankind. The United States and China said they support a declaration of G20 leaders to triple global renewable energy capacity by 2030 and also agreed to accelerate the substitution for coal, oil and gas generation. The joint statement said they anticipate meaningful reductions in emissions from the power sector this decade, but it fell short of calling for the phasing out of fossil fuels, a goal that China has described as unrealistic. Both sides also agreed to include methane in their 2035 climate goals, the first time China has made such a pledge, and committed to advancing at least 5 large-scale cooperation projects in carbon capture, utilization and storage by the end of the decade. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has said that China has real problems, speaking at a fundraiser in San Francisco on the eve of an eagerly awaited meeting in the U.S. city between himself and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Reports say the leaders of the world's 2 largest economies will huddle on the sidelines of the APEC summit in California for their first encounter in a year, as trade tensions, sanctions and the question of Taiwan have fueled quarrels between Washington and Beijing. Biden, who, like Xi, arrived in San Francisco, has characterized the meeting as a chance to right ties that have floundered in recent years. The 2 presidents are expected to meet for several hours today on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC summit in San Francisco. In the meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden has said he believes that a deal with Hamas to free the hostages the militants are holding in the Gaza Strip will happen, but did not offer specifics. Reports say that 9 Americans and a person with permanent U.S. residency are among an estimated 240 people taken hostage by Hamas fighters last month when they crossed the border to stage the deadliest attack in Israeli history. Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the White House said the 2 discussed at length ongoing efforts to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas, including many children and a number of Americans. According to the latest official Israeli figures, the October 7 Hamas attack left around 1,200 dead on the Israeli side, mostly civilians. The health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza says Israel's relentless assault in retaliation has killed more than 11,300 people, also mostly civilians, including thousands of children. In the meantime, Hamas have blamed both Israel and the United States for the Israeli army's raid on Gaza's largest hospital. Hamas in a statement said the raid on the Al-Shifa hospital also constituted a failure by the United Nations to defend Palestinians. The statement added that the silence of the United Nations and the betrayal of many countries and governments will not deter Palestinian people from clinging to their land and legitimate national rights. Moving on now, the first truck delivering fuel to the Gaza Strip since the war began has arrived in the besieged enclave. The diesel-fueled truck arrived in Gaza via the Rafah border crossing with Egypt today. However, it is not at all enough, according to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, adding that use of the fuel has been restricted by Israel. Israel has imposed a total siege on Gaza since attacks last month in southern Israel by Hamas. Limited deliveries of humanitarian aid have been crossing from Egypt into Gaza since October 21, but Israel had refused to let any fuel enter. On Tuesday, it gave approval for 24,000 liters, that is about 6,340 gallons of diesel, to be allowed into Gaza. But it is meant only for UN trucks and not for Gaza's hospitals, which are shutting down because they have no fuel to power their generators. The fuel was delivered to the UN to facilitate the delivery of aid after trucks on the Palestinian side stopped operating for lack of fuel, an Egyptian source told media. Now, fuel shortages have already caused or contributed to the closure of hospitals, bakeries, sewage, pumping stations, water desalination plants, and water wells, and are threatening to shut down telecommunication data centers and connection points within 48 hours. The UN said on Tuesday. Now, Gaza's two main telecommunications companies, Paltel and Jawal, warned today of a complete telecom blackout in the coming hours in the Gaza Strip due to a lack of fuel. We move on now to former Social Democratic and Labour Party SDLP Deputy Mayor of Derry City and Strabane, James McKeever, who has lost an appeal against his conviction for sexually abusing a girl in the 1980s. The 65-year-old is serving a 4-year sentence for 8 offences between August 1981 and December 1988. His victim was aged between 7 and 14 at the time of the abuse. He was found guilty in May last year, and the Court of Appeal in Belfast upheld his conviction. Elsewhere, at least 30 people have been killed in Indian-administered Kashmir today after a passenger bus skidded off a mountainous road and plunged down a rocky slope. The accident took place on a remote mountain road in the Doda area, about 200 kilometers southeast of the region's capital, Srinagar. Reports say more than 25 people were also injured in the crash. Away from that now, Denmark will restrict alcohol sales to minors and increase taxes on nicotine products to combat a worrying rise in consumption. Health Minister Sophie Lord said at a press conference that children and the young are starting to drink too early and they drink too much. She said youths were also consuming more snus, a sachet placed under the upper lip containing synthetic nicotine and often flavored to appeal to younger consumers. In response, she said sales of drinks with more than 6% alcohol will be banned to those aged 16 through 18, who until now could buy drinks containing up to 16.5% alcohol. Moving on now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak, has said that Ukrainian forces have gained a foothold on the left or east bank of the Dnipro River. Russia conceded on today that small groups of Ukrainian forces had set up positions in the village on the left bank, but Vladimir Saldo, the Russian-installed official in charge of the Kherson region still under occupation, insisted that they had sustained heavy losses and faced a fiery hell and had no chance of breaking through. Reports say that if the area is held, it would mean a significant advance for Ukraine. Recall that Russia retreated from the right bank of the river a year ago. The Ukrainian army has since been trying to create and hold a bridgehead on its eastern shore. Elsewhere, 3 Ukrainians who aided the Donald Trump campaign's efforts to discredit the Biden family have been charged with treason. The 2019 drive was led by former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who was Trump's personal lawyer at the time. It centered on unproven allegations that Joe Biden had corrupt dealings with Ukraine. As Vice President, Ukraine's Security Service (SBU) said the three men charged were paid by Russian military intelligence (GRU). It added that they had used a reportedly tense political situation to harm Ukraine's reputation abroad. The three men charged are understood to be current MP Alexander Dubinsky, former lawmaker Andrei Derkak, and ex-prosecutor Konstantin Kolek. Dubinsky has denied the charges. All three are said to be members of an agent network led by Russian General Vladimir Alexeyev, the deputy head of the GRU. The charges allege they pursued information subversive activities related to the 2020 U.S. election and were paid $10 million. In a separate development, a man accused of a hammer attack on ex-House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband has testified how he hatched a plan to end U.S. corruption after becoming absorbed in conspiracy theories. David DePape, aged 43, has pleaded not guilty to 2 charges, including attempted kidnap of a federal official. He cried as he testified how he hatched a bizarre plot that included wearing a unicorn costume while interrogating Pelosi and posting the video online. If convicted, he faces life in prison. Closing arguments in the trial are expected today. On Tuesday, in sometimes tearful testimony, DePape told the court he used to have left-wing political beliefs before a political transformation that started when he was living in a garage without a toilet or shower, playing video games for hours at a time. Giving evidence for more than an hour, he said that in the course of looking up information about video games, he became interested in Gamergate, an anti-feminist campaign that targeted prominent women in the gaming world and became a huge online trend starting in 2014. He began listening to right-wing broadcasters and watching political YouTube videos. He said he formulated a grand plan that involved luring targets to the Pelosi home. After the break, the United States has said that it will resume deliveries of food aid across Ethiopia in December, 6 months after they were suspended over corruption allegations. Just stay with us for details on this and more right after this breather.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
Thanks for staying tuned. The United Nations has said it will resume delivering humanitarian supplies and evacuating staff in Niger after the country's ruling junta lifted domestic flight restrictions. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, said the resumption of domestic flight operations will facilitate the monthly delivery of nearly 2.4 metric tons of medical supplies and other aid, as well as critical medical and security evacuations for humanitarian staff. The UN agency, however, added that it expects challenges fueling its aircraft. Moving on now, the United States has said that it will resume deliveries of food aid across Ethiopia in December, 6 months after they were suspended over corruption allegations. The U.S. International Development Agency, USAID, said significant reforms would ensure that the food supplies reached those who needed them most. It said the aid resumption will be on a one-year trial basis. According to reports, millions of Ethiopians face food shortages because of the effects of conflict and severe weather. Moving on now, the UK Supreme Court has rejected a controversial government plan to send migrants to Rwanda and upheld a lower court ruling that it was unlawful, in a major setback for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. A 5-judge panel at the UK's highest court unanimously sided with Court of Appeal judges that the policy was incompatible with Britain's obligations under international treaties. The judges agreed with the lower court's June verdict that Rwanda risked forcibly returning asylum seekers and refugees to a country where they could face persecution in a move known as refoulement. Reports say Sunak's ruling Conservatives have insisted the Rwanda scheme is crucial to reducing illegal immigration across the Channel on small boats, an issue set to feature prominently in the next general election. But the ruling covers a saga that began in April last year when Britain signed a deal with Rwanda to send undocumented migrants to interim centres there and leaves the UK leaders' immigration agenda in tatters. Sunak said the ruling was not the outcome they wanted, and the government will now consider next steps, while ministers in Kigali take issue with the ruling that Rwanda was not a safe third country. Elsewhere, Sri Lanka's Supreme Court has issued a symbolic ruling that the powerful Rajapaksa brothers, including 2 ex-presidents, were guilty of triggering the island's worst financial crisis by mishandling the economy. In a majority verdict on multiple petitions filed by academics and civil rights activists, a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court on Tuesday ruled that the respondents, who all later resigned or were sacked, had violated